Hey there! Welcome to Gen Con TV. This is Fireside with Peter Adkison. My co-host today is Beverly Marshall Sailing, and our guest today is Paul Peterson. So on this show, we go in search of really cool stories behind the scenes of your favorite games, specifically in this series of shows, Magic the Gathering. More specifically, the creation of Magic in the early years, basically the first half of the 90s. And I think, Paul Peterson, we might be able to get some interesting stories out of Paul.
Now I'm just going to disappoint.
Oh, yeah. Beverly at least knows a couple.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
We are going to tell stories about Paul Peterson.
Oh, there you go. That's fine. You can do that all day.
So let's put it in context, first of all. So when did you join Wizards of the Coast?
Late 94.
Late 94.
Yeah.
Mid 94.
Mid 94.
Mid 94.
Like,
right.
yeah, July, I think.
Yeah. And so put that in context, Magic the Gathering came out in the summer of 1993.
Right.
So by the middle of 1994, Magic was on its rocket ship to the moon. we had produced...
The curve was starting to turn.
I think it went a little further than the moon.
Yeah.
It was like, how far is this rocket going to go?
Right.
We had published Arabian Nights.
Yep.
And Antiquities.
Yes.
And,
And Beta. I'm not sure if Revised was out, but...
I don't... Maybe Revised was probably kind of out about the time you joined.
Right.
And so it was before Legends then?
It was before Legends, because I
Legends,
remember going to some conventions with Legends. And
Yeah. Because Legends Summer 19... Yeah. Yes, we had some Gen Con stories about Legends and Gen Con
Right.
Earlier on this show. Okay, so what were you doing in the spring of 1994?
In the spring of 1994. So what I was doing was playing Magic. I had discovered it at local game stores and was playing with my friends, and then I discovered Magic-L.
Yep.
Back in the day, they didn't have forums. You didn't have www anything. If you wanted to communicate with a company, you'd have a mailing list, and so it was like having reply all stuck on your email, basically.
So you were on the Magic-L email mailing list?
Yes. That's actually...
Right. That was the company mailing list. I remember this now. I've forgotten about that.
Right.
Okay.
But if you had a question, like customer service hadn't spooled up at Wizards yet. So if you had a question, you just type it to Magic-L, send an email to Magic-L, and I'm not sure, I don't remember who was moderating it at the beginning, would answer.
Yeah.
And so
it might have been me until I started answering questions
might have been.
incorrectly.
And then I took it away.
Oh, like no, you did. Yeah.
Because I think Dave Howell did it for a while.
That might
Because I think he was
true.
doing that when I was doing it for AOL.
Right, I think that might be true. So I was on Magic-L, and I was and we started to have a little community of the people who were there regularly, and we started making canned responses. Like somebody come on and be like, "How does banding work?" Because that was we just had like one of us would be like, "Okay, well here's the fact. Here's
stock reply.
Here's the stock reply." And so I was on there for a while, and then whoever, it must have been Dave. Anyways, they were like, "Look, I don't have time for this. Paul, do you answer the questions anyways whenever anybody asks them. Do you want to be the moderator?" So I became the moderator for Magic-L. This is before I was at Wizards.
Right.
So I was.
You weren't even getting paid, did you?
Well, no, that's not true. I was getting paid in products. So in some,
you were getting well paid.
I was about to say this may be the most I've ever gotten paid per hour in my entire life by getting product whenever anything came out. So I was the moderator on Magic-L, and my day job was actually I was a contract customer service rep for Microsoft.
And you were what, 14 at this
Yeah.
time?
No, I was 22, 23.
Because I know you were really young when we hired you.
Yeah,
we were
yeah,
all
yeah.
really young. But
Yes.
You were.
Yes. No, so 94, I would have been 25.
Okay.
When I.
Okay.
So I was a contractor at Microsoft telling people they couldn't have Windows support because it came with their computer and Microsoft didn't handle that. You can either pay for it or you can go call IBM, who you bought your computer from, right? And actually, near the end, I was on support for access for people who'd paid $10,000 for this program, and Microsoft's like, sorry, go talk to the person you bought it from, not us. Those were fun conversations.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wow.
So anyways, that's what
Yeah.
I was doing. I was doing customer service, and I was the Magic L rep.
So, and then I was going to ask, how did you come into the company? But it sounds like this Magic L, is that kind of how you got into working at Wizards of the Coast full time?
Yeah,
Was
basically.
it basically,
I heard about the job
Right.
because I was communicating with people at Wizards, and they were like,
Right.
"Look, we've got a customer service job. You
Right.
know, would you like to come in and interview for it?" And I was sort of like because I was the Magic L guy, and because I actually did customer service as my job, I was sort of like the holy grail for them, because
Right.
they were all great people and really good at customer service, but I had actually had training on how to answer phones properly and what to do with people and how to transfer them. And
So you were a shoo-in. You were the ringer.
I think so. I mean, I liked it. You'd really have to ask Kyle.
So Kyle Namvar,
Yes.
I assume? So
Yeah,
is he the one who interviewed you for the position?
They all interviewed me. That was,
They all.
That's how customer service used to work.
Yeah,
No,
there
no,
was
no,
like
but I mean, who's they all? Let's see.
Kyle and Namvar. I'm sorry, Kyle and Rias for sure.
Rias Hall, who's going to be on our show in
Yes.
a few weeks.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember who else was there before me. I don't remember,
yeah,
but there was
yeah.
like a panel who
Right.
interviewed me.
Right.
And that's just sort of how we ended up doing it. Every
Right.
time we'd interview somebody, it would be like all of us asking ridiculous questions.
And by the way, in case anybody watching is confused, yes, Paul started his career at Wizards in customer service.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you know him as this famous game designer who's designed a whole bunch of really cool stuff. But but at Wizards, he wasn't there yet, so
No,
we stuck
I
with
was
customer
not.
service.
I was not. Yeah, customer service at Wizards was a very interesting place to work.
Trial by fire.
It really was. It was. We'd have when we'd interview a new candidate, we would ask a bunch of good questions about being customer service and how would you deal with this situation, how would you deal with this situation, and then somebody would pipe up with something like, why is it generally a good idea to nuke them from orbit? That was an interview question for customer service.
Right.
Yeah, and based on your answer, those were culture questions basically. Are you going to fit into this crazy group of people who have to answer the most in-depth, ridiculous Magic questions all the time? All of that. So.
Well, and it's not like every question you got on the lines was a Magic question, really.
That is true. We got questions about. There was one phone call where somebody said they had a Magic question, and when they finished, they were like, "Well, is there anything else we can do for you?" And they're like, "Yeah, I like this girl, and I was thinking about asking her out. Do you think I should?" All right, we're here to answer your questions.
What did you say?
I didn't take that call, but what I know to have been said was, well, does she like Magic?
Right.
The answer was yes. It's like, then go for it.
Yeah.
Approved.
Approved. To
Approved.
go. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Ask her out.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. So you worked in customer service at Wizards for about 6 months or so.
Yeah,
like
about that, yeah.
Throughout most of 1994. Then.
Yeah.
Pretty much the balance of 1994.
Right.
So that you were there when we released Legends.
Yes.
And
I remember. I just one little aside.
Yeah, please.
One of my best memories in customers. I went to a lot of conventions. Like we all went to a lot of conventions that first year.
Right.
I remember we went to this convention that was in a hotel in Florida that was a mile off the coast, and there was a bridge that went out to it. And there's lots of stories about walking that bridge and things. But I just remember we were in the exhibit hall, which it was a tiny little convention, but we were there. We had a table and we're selling Legends like gangbusters or whatever. But we're sitting there and we can look out the window and there's a beach and there's literally dolphins frolicking. And I was just like, this is amazing. I'm sitting here selling Magic the Gathering to people. There's dolphins right there.
Yeah, it's pretty special what we lived through.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly special. I mean, and it we didn't know at the time how special.
Right. We were just holding on.
Yeah.
Just holding on and like, oh, this is what it's like to have a job after college.
Well, they like it.
Yeah.
They really like it.
Right.
I know as the CEO of the company, there was always, I look back and can remember sort of all this sort of cautionary ways of talking to me that people on like the board of directors and investors would have, like, oh, we don't want him to know how amazing this company is, because then he's going to get cocky or whatever, you know. I was
Or
always
freak
like-
out.
Or freak out.
Yeah.
And I was always, I mean, I was freaking out because I had no
Sure.
idea what the hell I was doing. But there was always this, you don't really realize sometimes how special life's moments are until
Right.
you can see them, you know, with the benefit of history.
Right.
Years later. It was it's an incredible thing. Okay, stories about the bridge. You mentioned you had stories about this bridge.
Well, we got there like late. We flew in and we took a cab out to the thing, and the whole island shut down at 6 o'clock, and we
Right.
were starving. Like the hotel restaurant didn't work, and the only thing there's a Waffle House on the other side of the
Beside this
bridge.
bridge.
We're like, well, how do we get there? Like, well, there's no taxi service on our little island, so we had to end up walking like across this bridge for a mile. With it was me and Siobhan Ricks, although at the time it was Joanne Wonderly, and Sean Carnes. And as we get to the bridge, Sean's belt breaks.
Oh,
And so he's holding up his hand and he's complaining and yelling as we're walking a mile across the bridge to get to a Waffle House. It was
Yeah, that's okay. I had to ask.
no,
right?
no,
Yeah.
totally. His quote from that was, "That sign better say Waffle House and Belt Store."
I can hear him saying
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
Saying
That's
that.
right. Yeah. Okay. So, well, any other interesting questions that you can remember being in customer service in those days?
Wow.
And we were listening to the sets. That was the Dark, or Legends, the Dark, and maybe Fallen Empires, where you'd moved.
Yeah.
Antiquities
Out by
was
then.
before
Yeah,
that,
I
right?
remember once I'd gone over one of the first things I did was proofing Fallen Empires or something like
Right.
that. So
right.
yeah, it's
right.
right in
So,
there.
right.
in
Right
there.
in there. Right. Yeah. That's that was fun times.
Very fun times. That's right.
Okay, so but you didn't stay in customer service
did not.
forever.
I did not.
Somehow
No.
did you show up at the wrong department one day?
I did. I
take-
was just like, my desk is, somebody's in my desk now. I guess I'll go sit over here. No, so the way I tell the story is that one of the cool things about being there was that we were like playtesting stuff all the time and playing games all the time. Everybody from customer service. There were times when the customer service group would spend the day in the kitchen because there was a phone on the wall that everything could get transferred to, and we'd be playing games all day. And whenever it rang, whoever's turn it was would go up and answer it and answer rules questions. But we played. I remember a lot of times. So this was right around the time that we were trying to get Robo Rally done. And actually out the door. And so we'd play a ton of Robo Rally.
Robo Rally being the game that Richard Garfield brought
Yes.
to us at Wizards to
The reason
publish.
that everything exists.
The reason everything exists is because of Robo Rally.
Right.
Everything
Yes.
exists because of Robo Rally.
Right.
Yeah. So that was how I met Richard.
Right.
He was presenting that game, and
It's
and
a
I
board
turned,
game about robots, and you should totally play it.
It's
yes,
amazing, yeah.
Yes. And I turned it down, thankfully.
Sort of.
Which
You
said-
put it on
down.
pause.
You didn't turn it down.
I said, yeah, I'm joking. I mean, it was basically the idea of making a board game. All we had made was role-playing games,
Right.
which were books.
Right.
Books, you know, and that was hard enough. We had, thank God for Beverly, because it made it even possible to begin with. And then the idea of a board game where there would be a box and a board and all these pieces
And miniatures.
and a book.
Yes, and a book.
And tokens.
And cards.
And cards and all this stuff. Yeah, I just looked at this and said, I don't know. Because my mind was thinking like, oh, that's 10 different types of things. That means 10 different types of vendors and blah, blah, blah. So so Richard, like, well, what kind of game do you want? And that led to Magic.
Right.
So so we eventually, thankfully, we went back and said, okay, once we were more sophisticated, had more money, okay, let's produce Robo Rally.
Right.
And yes, you should buy it.
Yeah, totally. But
If you can find
so
it.
we were playtesting Robo Rally, and we'd playtest Robo Rally like every night. We'd be playtesting, and Richard would be right there with us. So I played like tons of games with Richard. Then afterwards, we'd analyze it, and a lot of people would be like, "Oh, I liked it," or "I like this," but I'd be like, "No, this doesn't work."
Right.
Or this doesn't work, or I think we should do it like this, and I think we should do it like that. And so I think that sort of captured. Richard was like, oh, he's actually analyzing things. He's not just telling me whether he liked it or not. He's what
Right.
he liked. And apparently he at least liked my answers and thought they were good answers. So, so it's,
Great.
yeah.
I hadn't really heard that part of the story. I mean, I kind of heard the story from a different angle.
Sure,
I mean,
sure,
like,
of course.
my way I tell that story is one day Scaff came into me and
Scaffalius.
who was one of the thought leaders at Wizards.
Yeah, of course.
He's a developer for Magic the Gathering.
One of the originals.
One of the original East Coast playtesters. He's also going to be on our show in a few weeks. And Scaff came to me and said, "Hey, would you have an objection to us moving a customer service employee into R&D. R&D, research and development, was what we called the game design and development.
Right.
That's probably not a term any other game company uses, but I came out of Boeing, and Boeing had the R&D department. So
Well, I don't know. That's what I've always called it because that's where I started.
I know. I was and he said, I think it'd be great because with the customer service background, he's going to understand more customer service type things, and he's a really sharp guy, and we need the talent. And I'm like, for all the same reasons, I was like, yeah, right. And of course, we were talking about you, and and so we did.
I mean, you could have picked T. Bryan.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, oh, Paul Peterson. Wait a minute, Paul.
No.
You sure?
There are some good people on that team. We could totally.
So who approached you about it then? I mean,
Richard came and talked to me and said. As I recall, Richard came and he said, "Look, would you like to be at R&D instead of here?" And I was like, "Yes."
Yeah, I'm very curious to see whether Richard's conversation about that happened before my approval.
Oh
or
yeah,
not.
I don't know. That's a very good question.
That's a very funny question.
Okay, now I'll go check on it.
No, that's fine. Well, it would have been. Richard would have been confident in saying that because, I always saw my job as running the company to take the company in the direction that Richard wanted, right? Like, especially for Magic and his games, especially. Sure. But Richard also, after we merged Wizards of the Coast with Garfield Games, because there was this, this paper entity for a while that held the rights.
Yeah. My Robo Rally says Garfield Games on it.
Yes. And so we, after we merged the company, he was the largest shareholder. So really, I also had just a business, a business ethical reason to do the company, to take the company the way he wanted to go. So, he would have been. That was funny. Anyway.
Nobody was going to say no to Richard anyway.
Well,
no. And Richard was who wanted. Like, I never ever wanted to do anything differently.
Right.
And the only time we ever came close to arguing was over the Arabian Nights card backs. I think it was like, Richard, are you sure?
That's right. Different card back. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I think we really do need to change it. Okay, so you.
Wizards too was like. I've been at a few companies now, and Wizards was really one of the most R&D led companies that I've ever been at, where like everything was sort of like R&D makes something. There's all there's inputs and outputs and everything, but it really was sort of like R&D was like leading the charge in what the company was going to do. Which is
I always had this idea that a game, for any particular game, especially a big game like Magic the Gathering, that there was this vision for the game, like what was the game and the whole experience of playing the game, everything about the game, including the art and maybe to some extent how it was marketed. That originally, whoever designed this game must have had some of that in their head, right? And so try to carry that purity of vision through it. And also, having worked at Boeing for a few years before I came, before Wizards, at Boeing there was what was called the management track and the technical track, and the idea is that you could advance on the technical track in comparable ways, compensation-wise, and sort of status within Boeing as an engineer, along with being in the management track. Right. And so Richard and I, we always pegged our salaries as the same.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then whoever his top R&D people were, I always saw them as comparable to whoever my top business people were, and floated down the track.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? If you're trying to make a company, if you're a gamer, and you're trying to make a game company, you kind of want it to be about the games.
Right. Plus, it's also just like people have different skills. Like I know amazing designers who get to a certain point in like a tech company or computer company, and then they're like, well, in order to go up, you have to have people under you and you have to manage them. And they're like, that's not my skill set.
Right.
So it's a really good way to think about it, to be like, well, that's fine. That's not their skill.
Well,
we have people whose skill that is.
And Richard, he always said he didn't want to manage anybody.
Right.
He wanted somebody else to manage the R&D department.
Right.
And so when we did an org chart, we just put Richard off the box.
Yeah.
So Richard's not on the org chart. This is org chart is a chart showing the managerial responsibilities of the company, the flow of communication and responsibility and accountability. And Richard's just wherever he wants to be.
Perfect.
That's how we did it, and it worked. It was great. We always have Richard a free pass. He could walk into any meeting he wanted to. My door in my office was closed. He could just open it and come on in.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, so you got hired into R&D.
Yes.
What? And who was it? Mike Davis who was running the late?
Yes.
Great dear friend of ours.
Was Mike running it at that point? It might have been Joel.
No, I think Joel was a brand manager. I think it went from Mike Davis.
I think maybe,
and eventually to Jen Lin.
Yeah.
I think.
But it was Mike for a long time.
It was Mike for a long time. I think it must have been Mike Davis.
Probably.
So, so do you remember what you were? You don't remember your boss, okay? But
My boss was basically kind of Richard.
Do you remember the games that you worked on?
Yes, yeah.
So what were you assigned to?
I mean, it was sort of right around Fallen Empire's time, and I remember working on like Chronicles, where we took a bunch of old cards and made a set out of them, basically. Chronicles 1 and 2. I remember working on Alliances, I want to say. Like Ice Age Alliances was right around that time. Definitely remember Homelands.
But look, on the first, let's start with Fallen Empires. You said Fallen Empires. So do you remember, what did you do on Fallen Empires? Like
I'm pretty sure that Fallen Empires was like it pretty much already been designed when I came in.
When he starts with a sentence, I'm pretty sure it means he's just
this
like,
is 25
what do I want
years
the
ago.
answer to
No.
be? Oh, I know. We're all struggling with this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a good thing we're doing the videos now.
Yes.
Because we could really make them a lot better than if we'd had done them 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Now it's like, oh, I think it was this. That sounds good.
Yeah, the things I remember working on the most were early on were Chronicles and Homelands and things like that.
So when you say working on, though, do you mean that you were, well, for Chronicles, you wouldn't have been designing cards, because Chronicles was a reprint of certain cards that had, that, if I remember correct, say my memory is going too, but if I remember, the reason for Chronicles was that we wanted to get more cards into print that players needed for competitive play.
Right, exactly.
And they didn't have any other way to get them other than like Arabian Nights or something. You know, there was some card that was legal in some aspect of the tournament system. So you were picking or making,
helping pick
which of those cards would have been. So when you say you worked on Alliances, did you move into designing, or were you always in development?
No, mostly in development.
Development.
Early on. I mean, when I came in, it was not like,
here, go design a Magic set.
Yes, it was not like, Paul's here now, yay! Woo-hoo. He's give him a set to design. It was much more development work at that point.
So I think the question that we're really trying to get at here is, okay, you came to work, you showed up, you sat down. What did you do?
Well, I would I would do what they told me, which is sort of the.
How about this? What's the difference between design and development?
Oh,
in the world of a Magic set.
In the world of a Magic set, that design is for a set is coming up with the idea for the set, like you were talking about. It's about vision. It's about what kind of things. And then it's picking mechanics for the set, picking core mechanics like
flanking.
Or exactly. Whether the set's going to be about whether the set's going to be about the graveyard, to take a later example, but those sets were all about like putting cards in the graveyard and taking them back out and casting them twice and things like that. So you decide the mechanics, you decide the theme, which we'd work with continuity to sort of say, where are we in the timeline? Like when we went into the Brothers' War and things like that, it's like, this is what the next 3 sets are going to be about, is the Brothers' War, and make an arc
So you're talking about the timeline of, Dominarian history.
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to
where we're focused, what the story is for the set. Right. And then you start getting into the nitty gritty, and you make huge lists of cards and things like that. So that's all the design. You make the huge lists of cards, and you do a little bit of like tweaking and stuff. And then development.
That sounds like everything. Well, what's left after that?
No. Development is so you made a huge list of cards. You don't just print that. That would be a very interesting way to do it.
That would make your editor very sad.
Yes, your editor very sad, and everybody else too.
Yeah, doesn't it just go to editing after that?
No. Because you think these up, and you're like, oh, that card should clearly cost this much, and you're like, oh, no problem. Right. So then development. Development is taking all of that stuff that you've already done, and we're in the anvil. It's putting it on the anvil and hammering at it and making decks and saying, does this work the way we thought it worked? Does this mechanic work at all? Like we've done sets where we threw away an entire mechanic because it's like, this is just not working.
Yeah, is it fun?
Right.
Will it hold up in competitive play?
Right.
Is it going to...
Can we explain it in a way that will fit in the text box?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, can we explain it?
Exactly.
Is it going to
What
create...
point type do we need?
Yeah, at some point we made a switch from thinking it would be fun to create things that would drive customer service mad to thinking that maybe we should avoid trying
at some point though, we're like, it doesn't matter. We've made so many cards that something will happen, whether we want it to or not. No matter how much we avoid it, it will happen, and then we have to, So why we should just avoid it as much as possible and let it naturally occur.
Right.
The development is testing it and turning out that this card shouldn't cost 5, it should cost 4, or it should cost 6, or this card isn't the right flavor for the set, or
being like the cost being like the mana cost.
The mana cost, exactly. Or what's the difference between it costing 1 green and 2 colorless, and 2 green and 1 colorless, and all of that. And it's also thinking about everything holistically. Like one of the big shifts that happened sort of while I was in R&D and things is up to that point we'd just been making sets and pushing them out, but we started to have enough cards that we had to start thinking about how old of a set how many cards do we want in the environment, how many cards do we want people to have to think about. So we started making a standard set, how far back we go, and we started thinking more about, like when we first started, there was sort of no such thing as limited play. Right. It was just like, what cards do you have? Build a deck, go, right?
Right.
And so we started thinking more about like what a starter deck looks like and how to play. Like we played so many leagues in Wizards while we were there. Like every time a new set would come out, we'd make a new league and we'd play for a few months and learning about whether ante was a good idea or not.
Oh boy.
All of that stuff. So. Right. Yeah, so the development is more sort of taking the card set and thinking holistically about making sure there are cards that are good for limited, cards that are good for constructed, all of that. So.
Right. Yeah, it's play testing in a way too, right?
Yep. Game after game after game. People, they do tours sometimes and they'd come through and like, this is R&D, they play games all day. And I'm like, well, that's sort of true, but it's like, but when somebody really asked me about like, what's it like to play games all day? I was like, let me tell you something. So what's your favorite game? And it'd be like chess. It's like, all right, so we're going to play chess and I'm going to take all the pieces, I'm just going to dump them on the board. We're going to just set them up and we're going to go. And like, oh, that would be horrible. I was like, yes. Now let's play that 20 times until we figure out why it's horrible and start putting the pieces in the right places on the deck. It's like, yes, we just played games all day. Did you have fun doing it? I mean, there was an intellectual challenge there. But
yeah, sometimes, games are a lot more fun when they're good games, but they don't start off good.
Exactly.
Most games don't start off good.
No, definitely not.
Magic was kind of a crazy exception in that pretty much the earliest incarnations of Magic were incredibly good. But they did have problems.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Even the version that got published had problems.
No, nobody expected anybody to walk up with like 20 Black Lotuses in a deck and be like, I win. That's not fun. Right. Like that's just not fun. And so, we crafted it down until it was a much more fun thing. And we got really good at taking a set and making it so that just anybody who bought some and made decks out of it, it was fun and it was balanced and there weren't these horribly degenerate things going on all the time. So.
Well, and you were thinking too somewhat about, can this set be somebody's entry point?
Yes. Every time.
As opposed to, some of the other kinds of games where you're thinking about, okay, well, this is the core set and that's the entry point, and then we'll just have all these add-on things.
Right. Although Magic kind of takes a halfway point to that too, which is having the main set and then a couple expansions for the main set to create a more consistent arc across a year, for example. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the blocks.
The blocks.
Well, and coming up with concepts like the block.
Right.
Is the thing you do in R&D.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Well, that was a big part of the challenge of Magic was now you look back, there's so many pieces of it that you just take for granted now,
Right.
or people do,
Right.
right? And in the process of coming out with Magic, and from its earliest design up through the first few years, was trying to figure out how do you structure this thing, like the whole idea of an expansion. Like, does the like new cards? Let's not even use the word expansion, right?
Sure.
It's like, okay, we're gonna do a whole bunch of new cards that are gonna be an Arabian theme.
Right.
You know, Richard's having this conversation, you know, and so what do? Do we just keep publishing Magic the way we are, but now there are new cards that you can find, or do you package them separately? Well, now it seems obvious you package them separately.
Right.
But we didn't know that was the answer.
You could have just started just taking a bunch of things off the sheet, putting new ones on, and
just have a new press sheet,
Right, yeah.
4 press sheets instead of 3 or whatever,
Right.
and one new press sheet has a bunch of different new cards on it, and or you know, maybe take an old one out, you know, or
Right.
whatever, and just put them in the same packaging.
Right.
You know, or do you? Well, maybe we probably should tell people that we changed this.
In some way.
You know, or at least have a new ISBN number on it,
Right.
right?
Right,
For
right.
tracking inventory
Or
and stuff
put
like
2.0
that. Right?
on it or something. Right?
Yeah,
At
that
least.
was those were the crazy discussions of the early Magic. And so like like the idea of a blocker, like the idea of that I like with Ice Age, where
It's the first time that there was a Ice Age and then an expansion dedicated to Ice Age, right?
which was
Right,
Alliances, right? And then wasn't Weatherlight also on that block, or
No,
I'm not
no,
sure.
Weatherlight
No,
is-
that's later.
Yeah, Weatherlight's like Tempest.
Okay, so so Ice Age, and so this idea that, you know, and I remember Richard Scaff and Joel and people talking about this idea that maybe people would want to play in kind of a completely separate environment, right?
Right.
And like Ice Age ended up being, and so in my mind, I interpreted that as, well, these are going to be entirely new cards, right?
Right.
And then it's like, no, there's going to be a lot of cards that that are going to be in this environment.
Right.
And then there was like, well, then it's not going to feel new, right? I guess it depends on how many. And so there were discussions of like, well, okay, what percentage of the cards had to be new cards?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And stuff like that.
Well,
So-
there's new cards, there's old cards, and there's old cards with new skins.
yes,
Right.
or new art.
Exactly.
Or-
That's what I
yeah,
meant.
Yeah.
New art, sometimes a new, slightly different name,
Right.
but basically same function.
Right. And and experimenting with things like snow-covered lands.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a forest. It counts as a forest. Everything that says forest looks at it and says
Right.
it's a forest, but it's also snow-covered. So anything that says snow-covered.
Right. Yeah, and that emerging sort of that modularity of the design, templating, if you will,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
We,
yeah.
talked, we
Yes.
had a fun talk
Yeah.
with Darla
Oh, yeah, of
Kennery, who was
course.
on the show
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago. We talked about templating,
Right.
and she was very much involved in that from
From the
editing perspective and stuff. Okay, so how long did you work on Magic? Because you were at Wizards a number of years.
I was there from '94 to 2000. I worked on
So that's about the same time we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked on, I worked heavily on Magic at the beginning, like Chronicle, all through that, and then one day you came into a meeting. A Magic meeting,
Uh-oh.
and you were like, Paul. Basically, you were like, Paul. We'd done Jihad.
Okay.
We'd done Jihad, and
That's
you were
the
like,
first name for Vampire: The Eternal Struggle.
right, exactly. And you said, we're changing it to Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, and it's going to be this big change. Do you want to take it, basically?
Huh.
And I was like, sure, yes, of course I want to take it. So then a lot of my time sort of got moved over from working on Magic to now I was the lead designer for Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, basically.
Right.
And sort of from there, I always had my toe in Magic and I'd play test a lot, but I sort of became the guy who did the not Magic games. Like originally, after we sort of got V-Test going, Richard and I were working on the design for Netrunner. Like the two of us were like trying things and designing Netrunner.
I had forgotten about the Vampire Eternal Struggle association with you, but I remember that you designed Netrunner with Richard.
Well, I was designing Netrunner with Richard, but I was
right.
also doing VTest, so we didn't have a lot of time to do it. And then one day, Richard came up and he's like, "I've got this idea for asynchronous and the runner versus the thing." And so it essentially turned, and like he and I had designed a bunch of prototypes, but like the final design of it was like 90% Richard
sure,
at least.
sure.
And then I started working on it with him after that. So I was the lead designer for VTest. I was a designer on Netrunner. I was a designer on BattleTech when we started doing that. Just like if it wasn't Magic, I was probably working on it in some respect.
And by BattleTech, you mean the BattleTech trading card game?
Yes, the BattleTech trading card game.
Yep.
And Xena and Hercules.
Xena and Hercules.
Oh man, I forgot we even did those.
Looney Tunes and WCW and Harry Potter eventually. Like I worked on like 11 or 12 different collectible card games while I was there. But there was a point though after a couple of years of me doing that where they were like wanted to refresh me back in, and so I designed Apocalypse.
Oh, okay.
I worked on that block. I was like a developer in the set before Apocalypse, and then I was the lead designer on the Apocalypse set. So I did get.
So you finally got to have a design credit on a Magic set.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Yeah, we really made you work hard to get to there, didn't we?
A little bit. Well, you've got all the Xena and Hercules experience. I'm sure it'll come into play.
And meanwhile, the people that stayed in customer service got there much quicker by doing Homelands.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah. But then they were, we're still in customer service.
Right. Yeah, there's the truth. There's the truth.
Well, and I'm not the only one who came through customer service. Like Sean became a designer eventually out of customer service.
Sean Carnes?
Sean Carnes, yeah.
Okay.
He started in customer service with me, and then eventually he is like.
It didn't really matter where he sat though, because you could hear him throughout the entire office.
No, that's totally.
Sean had a very large voice. His nickname was Captain Volume.
Yes, 100%.
If that stuck or not, but I do remember that.
No, he was Captain Volume, and then Richard Gutierrez was Noise Boy, because they sat next to each other, and they were both kind of loud people. So.
Right.
The noise annex was over there.
So do you remember some of your interactions with other R&D guys back in the day? Like what? Well, first of all, how were you received by the people already in R&D when you moved over from customer service?
Well, everybody was happy to have somebody there. They all liked me, and I mean, when it started, like. It was I was hired as, I think it was like assistant designer was what it technically was. So there was a lot of like, Paul do this, Paul do that. I'm gonna do this and do that.
Right.
And then more and more, especially once I started doing Vampire and stuff like that, it was more like talking equals about things and things like that. So it was I mean those guys are awesome, and they've all mostly gone on to do great things in gaming. Dave Petty went back to go be a liquid engineer, fluid dynamics engineer, but other than that, I think most everybody's stayed in the industry.
Yeah, well, certainly Richard, Scaff,
Sean,
Jim.
Sean
Carnes doing a lot in video games and stuff, and Joel Mick. I'm not sure, but I know he was originally in tax law. I don't know if he went back to tax.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm sure. I really doubt that.
We used to always joke about him being the ultimate rules lawyer.
Yes. Because if you want a good rules lawyer for R&D, hire an attorney.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
So now it's sort of Brian Lewis is the rules lawyer.
Yeah.
All right. So, trying to figure out a good way to nudge out another story out of you here, right?
Stories. Wow, that's good.
Were you still going to conventions as an R&D person?
Sometimes, less so. Mostly like Gen Con, obviously, was where the whole company would go and do stuff.
Well, so hey, we were talking about what it takes to design an expansion, have the vision for it, and you mentioned you got that role with Apocalypse.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about Apocalypse? Like, what did you have in mind for Apocalypse?
Oh, wow. So Apocalypse is an expansion to a base set, right? So I came into it with a lot of stuff already in place, the Brothers War, right, going on. Right. And it was a follow-up to I don't remember the set just before it, but I think Apocalypse was the third one in the series. But they'd been exploring they'd been exploring like-minded colors and things like that in there, and we were like exploring opposites.
Oh,
It was the
okay.
apocalypse. Everything was going crazy. Things were so we got to
Like a white black.
yeah.
cards
So we got to
and-
do
yeah.
some cool stuff there. So we came into it with this like, well, where are we gonna take the story from here? Well, we're gonna burn it all down essentially, which is a fun place to start
Right.
start with. So that was really cool and exciting, and trying to make a set that was kind of anti the previous set but still fit into the block. So just from
Right.
the get-go, we were going into taking it in an interesting direction. So.
Right. Great. Well,
How do you make mechanics fit a storyline?
That is a good question. I mean, to some extent, like we were talking earlier, this is not an apocalypse story, but like the I'm trying to remember what the name of the set was, but the set that like the set Richard designed that came out in early 2000s that was focused on the graveyard. It was focused from the get-go
right.
on discarded things.
that was after
and-
I left.
Yeah. It was sort of being designed when I left too. So, but the idea to make make it about things that come back and things, historic things, and rewinding time and things like that is all sort of, that's a natural fit for the graveyard. The sets just before that were all about multicolored stuff, and so that's all. Now you've got to, Magic is so much about the flavors of the colors, and now you've got to decide what it means to be green and white, to be an allied, to be a card that's both green and white. And mechanically, that's very easy. Or like the green mechanics are big creatures and gain life, so you make something that is a big creature that gains you life. But you've also got to deal with the flavor there, because Magic. Like, I think one of the reasons Magic is the huge success it is not just the mechanics that are on the card, like the words that are on the card. It's also the pictures and the text and everything. Like nobody forgets Khan's run. It's the Lurgoyf, right? That just grabs you and pulls you in, right? And the picture on there with the Lurgoyf attacking and stuff. Like, if it was just a blank card with words on it and numbers,
you need that.
Right,
That art.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the story is like long time since I've been at Wizards, but over the course, like people, like my friends are still playing Magic, and they talk about Ravnica, and like this is we're into like the third set of Ravnica stuff, because the stories are so powerful and cool, and the guilds and how they work and things like that. People are invested in that, and they invested in like, well, this is my deck that's about this guild in Ravnica and things like that. Like the stories are so powerful. Like
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, it'd be really remiss to sort of end there. Like you've done so much more since leaving Wizards.
Sure.
So
Yes.
so let's. I mean, like, when you left Wizards in 2000-ish,
Yep.
did you go right to a new job? Did you have an opportunity?
So actually, I left Wizards, and I was sort of like, well, what am I going to do now?
Right.
Looking around a little bit, thinking about, like, Wizards published my first board game, my first card game, like independent, like Guillotine is my first
Right.
card game, right?
Yes.
And
Great game.
And still a
you.
personal favorite.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I take only this much credit for it, because I mean, without Chris and Quentin and Mike, that game would not be
Mike
what it is.
Selinger?
Mike Raby, sorry.
Mike Raby.
Yeah,
and Quentin
Hoover. They did the art, and
right.
Chris Rush did the art direction on it.
Yes.
Amazing.
Right.
Anyways, so I was sort of like, should I go do that now? Should I do
Right.
board games? But what actually happened was, I got a call from Jesper Mirfors,
Yeah.
and he said, well, I'm doing some work for a company down in Arizona. They're making an MMO, and we'd all been huge EverQuest.
Right.
Like
Right.
Richard bought the computers that were in the computer room at Wizards of the Coast so that we could all play EverQuest together, and so that we could all play StarCraft and EverQuest, if I remember, or Warcraft.
You said Richard, but
Richard.
Richard Garfield.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
He's that's, as I understand it, he like personally made sure that we had good computers to play these
Right.
games with. We'd all played EverQuest together and things like that. And so Jesper said, there's a company down here that's making an MMO. They need some designers. Why don't you
Right.
go? So I flew down to Arizona, interviewed, and that's how I started working in computer games.
Right.
So I worked on an MMO for a couple of years, and then that game launched, and they laid everybody off, as happens in the computer industry all the time. And then Jesper's like, well, That sucks. That's horrible. I've got this idea for this game that's on poker chips.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, this is great. This is a great game. Jesper, you have really good ideas. You know what I have is a lot of experience balancing a game like this. And so Jesper and I worked on it for a while, and then we decided
clout.
That was clout. We decided to start a business, and we talked to some people. I think the CEO of Tully's Coffee was interested at one point, but we ended up picking somebody we knew.
And
Which is me.
Yes. So that's the next time you and I work together.
That's right. We worked together at
I got to work on it too.
Hidden City Games.
Yes, that's
on
right.
Clout. And unfortunately, that business didn't do so well.
That's fine.
eventually,
Well,
but, you know.
I think the clout business did great.
I'm just really sad that the Marvel Clout never came out because
I know,
that was
we had the
super
license.
awesome.
I mean,
I was having so much fun.
it was. I was getting ready to redesign everything to be like Clout's a great game, but it's definitely a core hobby game. Like the rules on it are very crunchy and big, and we were talking about going into Target, so we were going to redesign the entire thing to be
I remember.
a much cleaner, streamlined game.
We were close. We were very close.
Yeah,
We had the license.
Well,
Yeah. Well, I think what killed that business is we could never get the price of the chips down
Right.
to where that would support a price at consumer
Right.
level that people would buy. It was just like a dollar a chip. It was just
yeah,
too much.
exactly. You buy that booster pack that had 2 chips in it.
Just
That was
couldn't bring it.
awesome. But
Years later, I met a guy who said, "Oh, I could have made those for you for a fifth the cost." And I'm like, "Okay, well,
No, that was
Too late now.
Yeah, exactly.
Too
Far
late
too
now."
late.
So, do we have any questions from the audience?
Sure do.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
First question is for Peter.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, good.
So it's kind of a more general magic question. Did you keep any of the original artwork, and if not, what happened to it?
Oh, did I keep it original? I kept, I had a very fine collection of original art for a very long time. And about 25 to 30 pieces of art from the original Magic, all original Magic art. A couple pieces from other things that I really liked, including 5 of the Power 9 cards. And I went through a period of tough times financially around 2007, and I was always looking at that art and going, maybe I should sell that art, right? But I didn't. I survived those tough times.
Woo! I was
Turned
about to say.
around. Gen cards started taking off. We paid off some debt that we owed, and things started looking really good for me financially again. And then I started a film company, and then from that position decided, okay, now I feel like I can sell that Magic art. So
Now that I don't have to sell it.
Now that I don't have, I couldn't bring myself to sell it as if I would have had to, but that situation. But yeah, eventually I sold it and to help fund my film company.
Sure. But I mean, one really interesting thing is that Magic, like a lot of companies at the time were not doing this, and Wizards was. Magic was very in favor of artists' rights. And so the artists, I mean, at the time, like nowadays, for art, for games and stuff, it's almost all digital. They just do it on their Wacom. They do digital pictures and they just send the file in. At the time, it was all hand painted art. Like all of it exists as physical art, and the artists owned their physical piece. Like Wizards had the right to print it on whatever they wanted to print it on. Paid royalties, by the way, to do so. But the artists kept the original art, and most of them would sell them in galleries. And at the beginning, they didn't know. It was a piece of art, so they'd sell it what a piece of art this big was worth. And then they started to discover that people were crazy about it, and those things became more and more expensive and more expensive. Like I have a couple of, I think I have a piece, Heather Hudson piece from like Ice Age, and some. I have a couple of original pieces that I was lucky enough to get. But it's just crazy how much those things would go for eventually.
Yeah, I have one Rob Alexander piece.
Oh, that's gonna be gorgeous. Rob is so good.
From Ice Age.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Because my husband was the model for it.
Oh, of course.
And I was not going to let anybody else have it. So Findhorn Bow is all mine.
That's right.
Yes. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Excuse the noise.
Yes.
The joys of doing a live show. Paul, what do you think was the most important moment in Magic history?
Oh geez.
Ooh.
The most important. Huh. Wow, that is a big question. There's so many good. Like, I mean,
I mean, after Richard designing it, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yes.
if Richard didn't come up with the idea,
Well, yeah.
then
Well,
none of the
that's
other
kind of what I'm
moments after
thinking
that
too. Is like
would
I
have
could
had
talk
that.
about how important alpha is, and like my theories on like the fact that Black Lotus exists is the most broken card you could possibly imagine. I think that contributed to Magic's success. The fact that these crazy, weird
Yeah,
cards
yeah.
that would do these crazy things, that they existed, they got people excited, and then we moved into a place where people wanted a more balanced game and stuff, but they were already fans that had been hooked by these crazy things.
I agree 100%. I mean, I remember there was this moment when we were just about to go to press. I don't know if we had press sheets yet, but it was really good. It was
Right.
definitely 11th hour. And Scaff came along and like he's like, we can't. These cards are broken because he knew the Moxes
Right.
and Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall and
Right.
Time Walk and it's like these cards are broken. We cannot publish these cards and I'm like, we're already pressed. What do you mean they're broken? I understand,
Right.
and we had that debate of and there was kind of a sense of like, well, maybe we can fix it later. I mean, it was just like
how many
like,
Black Lotuses is somebody really gonna get?
I
They'd
mean-
have to get a bunch of them for it to be a problem.
Yes, there was also
Yeah.
that argument.
Yeah.
I think that was Richard's argument. It's like, well, in order for that to be a problem, you have to, they're doing the math. They're like, how many cases of Magic cards would you have to buy to get enough cards to create these decks? It would be a problem. And it's like, they'd be spending that. Nobody is going to spend that kind
Right.
of money on
Right.
Magic cards. And if they do, well,
Good.
Good.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're
100%.
right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Paul. There was this this unlimited boundary of
Right.
Magic, like anything crazy could happen. It was
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was a key where we were always apologetic about it, like, oh, we're so sorry we screwed up and produced these cards that are broken. Yeah, all the really expensive ones on
Yeah.
the secondary market.
That's right. You can tell
Yeah.
which ones are the.
You can tell which ones are broken by how much you have to pay for them. And and of course we did fix the problem later. We came out with an organized play program. We came out with
Right.
limits on what you could put in
Exactly.
competitive play. People they had all the fun of creating decks that I still have my one-turn kill deck.
Right.
It's amazing, right?
Right.
It's Black Lotuses, Blue Moxes,
Right.
Ancestral Recalls, Time Walks,
Yeah.
Time Twisters, and Juggernauts to do damage, right?
of course.
And it's fun to show that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the next key thing after like the release is probably like when Legends came out and we introduced gold cards for the first time. It sort of revolutionized like that. Like I was talking about, like what does a white and green card look like? What is a card that has both those capabilities? I mean, like I think the gold cards going like if you just look throughout the history. In fact, I remember while we were there looking at some sales data about like a set that had gold cards would sell this much, and a set that didn't have gold cards would sell this much. So maybe we should have gold cards more often. I remember those things happening. So yeah,
Right.
that's probably the next key like change that happened. And, yeah.
Yeah. Gold cards are multicolored
Right.
cards, right? Cards, my multicolored meaning cards that would take more than one color of mana to cast that card,
Right.
And we introduced them in Legends. I think specifically for the Elder Dragons, I believe, because
Right.
of course Steve Connor designed Legends. He's
Sure.
all about big monsters,
Right.
right? So
Right.
he had the Elder Dragons, and I
Well, all the legends are like
Yeah.
all of
and
them are multiple.
legendary creatures,
Yeah, yeah.
legendary characters,
Right.
and so yeah, so they're and so well, if the card is going to cast white mana, black mana, green mana to cast, what color border do you put around it? Well,
Right.
we have to come up with a different color, so we came up with
Right.
gold color.
Right.
Yeah.
And then after that, maybe Planeswalkers is the next huge innovation in Magic. Like,
Well, your organized play.
well, yes, of course. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Organized play is
Yeah.
huge. Like the fact that Magic treated their players as like before there were esports, it was essentially like we turned it into a sporting event.
Yeah, I think I mean we were standing on the shoulders of games like Bridge and chess
Sure.
and that already had competitive structures, but Wizards really played an important role in when we took Magic and said we want to rebrand Magic from a collectible in sort of the wake of the Fallen Empire's problems, rebrand it as an intellectual sport.
Right. Yeah.
And made it all about competition, big money prize packages, and.
But it wasn't just about. One of the things I liked about how we did organized play was that it was not just about pro tour level stuff. It was also about having an organized way to do little tournaments at your local game store, and
100%.
so it's still casual, but it's like a bowling league.
Right. Yeah.
You can be a pro bowler, but you can also just go on Saturdays and.
It was fabulous for retailers.
Yes.
It became, by us pushing the idea of a draft, where you had to buy new cards in order to play. It gave a reason for competitors to come, gamers to come into the store. It gave the reason for the store to have.
And Wizards supported that as more than any company. Before that, pretty much like the kits that they would send to retailers and be like, here are unique cards, here are alternate art cards, here are good prizes that people will really want to come into your store, play the game, and get these prizes. Like, we're going to give you a bunch of free stuff for you to give away and run in your thing. Like, that's just brilliant.
We only have a few minutes. Oh, yeah.
Does Paul still play Magic?
Do you still play?
I do sometimes, yes. I've for a long time. I haven't been like gone to tournaments and things like that in a long time. But I learned from you actually when we were at Hidden City. We were like, we wanted to play Magic sometime, and you're like, well, all I ever play now are the PCDs.
Right.
And I was like, that's awesome because you just
pre-constructed decks.
The pre-constructed decks, right?
And recently I started a new project. I started building pre-constructed decks for all the sets that came before the Urza's block.
Wow!
Right. So I went out because I didn't have cards. I didn't keep a bunch of cards. Right. I went out and spent a fair amount of money and bought like 10,000 old Magic cards, but none of the super expensive ones because I don't need Moxes and Lotuses to build fun decks, right?
I mean, you just want to capture the feeling, make a valid deck.
So I've been, so my goal is to have in a bin 4 ready-to-play original Magic decks, 4 Arabian Nights decks, 4 Antiquities decks, 4 Legends decks, etc. for all the.
And it's just great because you get the feeling of the set without having to go
to walk down memory lane. It's a lot of fun.
I play Arena a bit. I played Magic Online for a while. But recently I've started playing Arena because it's fun and it's great to just do a draft for.
Kristen showed me how to play Arena. You still running your Arena decks online? So, all right. Hey, we are almost out of time. Before we go, I want to give you a chance to promote something you're working on these days, or tell people what are you doing these days. What are you doing these days?
What am I doing these days? Well, the game I'm most well known for is Smash Up. And thank you. It's been going. I've been doing it for a long time now. I think I'm working on the 18th expansion for it.
Wow.
Like I'm trying to catch up to Magic.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. So that's so people can go play Smash Up. I've got just like last year I did a game called The Ninth World that Lone Shark put out. Mike Seliger's company put out. That's based on Monty Cook's Numenera World.
Okay.
I've got a couple of games, and this year I sold a bunch of games. I made a bunch of games, prototypes and stuff, and sold them to companies. And we've been working on them the last couple of years. And this year, a couple of them will probably be coming out at Gen Con. So you can look for ones coming out from Breaking Games. There's a chance one's coming out from R&R.
Do you know the names of these games?
It's called Dungeons Are Dangerous. The Breaking Games game is called Dungeons Are Dangerous.
Dungeons Are Dangerous.
Goblin Town may be coming out from R&R.
And Goblin Town.
Dungeons
Are Dangerous and Goblin Town.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what I do. I make games.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. We are about out of time, so I gotta look at my notes here because there's a whole bunch of things I'm supposed to say here at the end.
Thank you for being on the show.
And everybody's you got the glasses. So yes. Thank you for joining us today. We love having you come here. Yes, sorry.
This has been fun.
Yeah. And thank you, Beverly, for coming back. Appreciate it.
Always.
Love having you as my co-host on this show. And thanks to Paul Peterson, our guest on the show. Want to thank our sponsor, Chaldea. We are in the Chaldea Film Festival.
This place is amazing. I wish they
Thank
could.
you
should like do one episode where you're like, look at this.
We're going to
place,
figure out a way to do
That's
that
amazing.
at some point. This is my other company is a film company. We're making a fantasy series. Hopefully, it's going to release next year
Awesome.
called Chaldea, and we're there. Thank you to Gen Con TV for having our show
Yes.
here on it. And next week, please come back. I hope you'll join us. We will have Tom Waterstrand on the show.
I love that guy. He's like the nicest guy in the entire world.
He's the nicest guy in gaming after Matt Forbeck.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. He has a lot of. He was originally in pre-production, in print buying.
Well, he was originally an artist.
and that's the cool shtick with Tom Waterstrand. He was a magic artist also, right. So he did. You probably, as watching, probably know him more from his art. So I hope you come back for that. And in the meantime, I hope that you will join us on Gen Con TV for Table Takes, which is on Fridays at 11 a.m. and also the Brothers Merv, which is on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. All right. I think that's it, because that's all I have on my card. So hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.